Blood dripped from Zoe Robinson's clenched fist as camera flashes lit up the boardroom. 20 executives sat frozen in stunned silence. "Congratulations on your promotion," announced CEO Richard Evans, unaware that the flight attendant who had humiliated Zoe just the day before now stood frozen in the doorway. "Before we dive into this shocking moment, tell us, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to follow Zoe's incredible journey of resilience and justice in the face of systemic racism in corporate America. Ready to learn how this powerful scene came to be? Let's rewind." Zoe Robinson's alarm blared at 3:30 a.m., jolting her awake in her Brooklyn apartment. The 35-year-old marketing executive had exactly 2.5 hours to prepare for the most important day of her 15-year career. The Chicago presentation wasn't just another pitch. It was her shot at the director of global marketing, positioned the role she'd been working toward since graduating summa cum laude from Howard University. She slid out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her boyfriend, Calvin, padding to the bathroom. Zoe stared into the mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, earned from weeks of preparation. She'd stayed up past midnight, refining slides, rehearsing responses, and researching every board member who'd be in that room. For a black woman in corporate America, being prepared wasn't enough. She had to be flawless. "You ready for today?" Calvin mumbled from the doorway, his voice thick with sleep. He wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "As ready as I'll ever be," Zoe replied, leaning into the embrace for a moment before gently pulling away. "I need to get moving." Calvin sighed, watching her begin her meticulous morning routine. "You know, white executives don't stress like this before presentations. That's because white executives don't have to prove they belong in the room every time they walk in," Zoe said, her voice tight. They'd had this conversation before. Calvin, a remote software engineer, couldn't fully grasp the constant pressure Zoe navigated. In his world, results spoke for themselves. In hers, results were only the beginning. In the shower, Zoe's thoughts raced through her journey. The unpaid internship that forced her to work nights at a cafe to make rent. The entry-level job where her ideas were stolen by a white manager. The junior executive role, where clients still asked to speak to someone in charge, even though she was leading the team. 15 years of microaggressions, of being underestimated, of being twice as good for half the recognition. After her shower, she pulled out the navy blue Chanel suit she'd invested in 3 months ago. It fit her athletic frame perfectly. The price tag had stung, but her mentor, Patricia Washington, had once told her, "In these boardrooms, they judge the packaging before they hear the contents." Patricia, the only other black woman executive at Pinnacle Industries, had become a guiding light. At 62, she had broken barriers Zoe could hardly imagine, paving the way for women like her. Their weekly coffee meetings were a sanctuary where Zoe didn't have to explain or defend her reality. As she applied her makeup professional, not to bold, her phone rang. Her mother's name lit up the screen. "Mom, it's not even 5 a.m., Zoe answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she applied mascara. "You think I could sleep, knowing what today means?" Elaine Robinson's voice still carried the soft lilt of her Jamaican heritage, even after 40 years in the States. "Your father and I just wanted to call before you left." Zoe's throat tightened. Her parents had sacrificed everything for her education. Her father worked double shifts as a hospital orderly. Her mother cleaned houses while studying for her nursing license. Their dream had always been for Zoe to reach heights they couldn't. "I'm going to make you proud," Zoe whispered. "Double quotes, child. We've been proud since the day you were born," her mother replied. "Just remember what your grandfather always said, keep your head high, and your standards higher." After hanging up, Zoe packed her materials into her leather briefcase. Another investment. Every detail mattered today. Flash drive, backed up twice, portfolio, printed copies ready, tablet, fully charged with a downloaded version of her deck. Calvin appeared with a travel mug of coffee. "You've got this, babe. They'd be idiots not to promote you." Zoe smiled and took the coffee. Despite their different perspectives, Calvin had always been her cheerleader. "I'll call you when I land." At 5:15 a.m., her Uber arrived. As the car wound through Brooklyn's quiet streets toward LaGuardia, Zoe mentally rehearsed her presentation one last time. Her campaign had boosted Pinnacle Industries' engagement by 38%. In just one quarter, the account was worth $50 million. Numbers didn't liven when bias tried to ignore them. By the time she reached the terminal, Zoe wasn't nervous anymore. She was ready. What she wasn't prepared for was how drastically the next 24 hours would change her career, and her understanding of what it really meant to fight for your place in a world that wasn't built for you. The premium check-in area at LaGuardia gleamed under soft lighting, a world apart from the harsh fluorescence of the main terminal. Zoe approached the first-class counter, rolling her carry-on behind her. Only two white businessmen stood ahead of her, both greeted warmly by the attendant. When Zoe stepped forward, the smile vanished from the attendant's face. His name tag read Bradley. According to his name tag, his name was Bradley. He glanced up, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. "Economy check-in is in the main terminal," he said curtly, without even glancing at the ticket Zoe had placed on the counter. "I'm aware," Zoe replied evenly, tapping her first class boarding pass. "I'm checking in for the 6:45 to Chicago." Bradley's expression shifted just slightly, but Zoe recognized it instantly. It was that subtle recalibration, the quiet dissonance people experience when their assumptions about her didn't line up with reality. He checked her in without another word, but the easy warmth and friendly tone he'd given the two white businessmen before her gone. Zoe didn't flinch. This wasn't new. She'd built armor for these daily paper cuts of prejudice. Today, though, she didn't have time to dwell on it. She had bigger battles ahead. The security line moved quickly. Zoe placed her laptop, shoes, jacket, and briefcase into the gray plastic bins and walked through the scanner. Beep. "Step aside, ma'am," a TSA agent said, gesturing her toward the secondary screening area. Zoe complied silently, watching as several white passengers who had also set off the scanner were waved through with a simple handheld wand. A female agent approached, snapping on a pair of blue gloves. "I'll need to check your hair," she said flatly. "My hair?" Zoe asked, already feeling the weight of dozens of eyes on her. "Security protocol." Zoe stood still as the agent's hands moved through her carefully styled bun, destroying the sleek shape she'd spent 20 meticulous minutes perfecting that morning. Across the screening area, Zoe caught the eye of an older white woman who quickly looked away, ashamed to have been caught staring. A man's voice cut through the quiet. "What do they think she's hiding in there?" he said, not bothering to lower his tone. "An entire beauty supply store," someone else muttered. "Probably costs more than my ticket." His companion snorted. "Bet she got that first-class seat through one of those diversity programs. My company does it all the time." Zoe said nothing. Not because she didn't have a response, but because today wasn't the day to lose control. The time? Gotta meet those quotas. The man snickered. Zoe's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent, focused. Presentation. After being cleared, she gathered her belongings and made her way toward the first-class lounge. In the bathroom, she paused in front of the mirror, trying to restore the sleek bun the TSA agent had carelessly disrupted. The door creaked open. A black security guard stepped in, glancing over his shoulder to make sure they were alone. His name tag read Raymond. "Sorry about that back there," he said quietly. "Happens to my wife every time she flies. It's not right." Zoe met his gaze in the mirror. No explanation needed. No forced smile. No attempt to downplay her experience. Just that quiet, unspoken understanding that passed between black people moving through predominantly white spaces. "Thank you," she said simply. "Good luck out there," Raymond replied, then exited the room. Inside the first-class lounge, Zoe felt the weight of another gaze. A blonde flight attendant was watching her intently from the refreshment counter. Her name tag read, Heather Winters. Heather's eyes followed Zoe as she found a seat and opened her laptop, pretending to focus on reviewing her presentation slides. Every few minutes, Zoe looked up to find Heather still staring, whispering to another crew member while glancing her way. The familiar internal debate crept in. Say something, risk being labeled difficult or aggressive, or ignore it and conserve energy for what really matters. Today, she chose to let it go. Eyes on the goal. Presentation, promotion, purpose. When the boarding call came, Zoe joined the line for first class. Heather Winters was now scanning tickets at the gate, her demeanor sunny and professional until Zoe stepped forward. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Peterson. Wonderful to see you again, Mrs. Goldstein. Safe travels, Dr. Hansen." Then, Heather's smile faded as she studied Zoe's ticket a beat too long. "First time in first class?" she asked, her tone loaded with implication. Zoe met her eyes without flinching. "No." She held out her hand. Heather returned the boarding pass without a word or smile. No warm wishes, no pleasantries. Zoe walked down the jetway and drew a slow, steadying breath. Just a few more hours. Chicago. The presentation. The moment she'd spent 15 years working toward. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that this airport gauntlet was just the beginning. Seat 3A. Zoe stowed her briefcase beneath the seat in front of her and settled in. Around her, the first-class cabin buzzed with pre-flight rituals. Flight attendants offering champagne, passengers adjusting neck pillows, laptops snapping open. Heather moved through the cabin with practiced ease, her smile bright as she attended to the mostly white passengers. "Champagne?" she asked the silver-haired man in 3B, deliberately avoiding eye contact with Zoe. "Yes, thank you," he replied. Then, gesturing toward Zoe, he added, "And one for my roommate as well, I presume." Heather's smile tightened. "Of course," she said, pouring a second glass and placing it on Zoe's tray without acknowledgement. The man extended his hand toward Zoe. "William Grant," he said, "heading to Chicago for business or pleasure?" Zoe returned the handshake. "Business, Zoe Robinson." "Same here," he said. "Board meeting at Pinnacle Industries, quarterly reviews, strategic planning, ... the usual corporate circus." Zoe nearly choked on her champagne. William Grant, one of the board members who would be evaluating her presentation. She hadn't recognized him from the decade-old headshot on the company website. "Are you all right?" he asked, noticing her reaction. William looked at her with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, noticing her sudden shift in expression. Before Zoe could respond, Heather returned to their row, her professional smile replaced by thinly veiled suspicion. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said sharply. "Are you certain you're in the correct seat? This is first class." The question hung heavy in the air list with implication. Several nearby passengers turned to watch. "I'm quite certain," Zoe replied calmly, holding up her boarding pass. "Seat 3A. As assigned." William's eyebrows lifted in surprise. "Is there some sort of problem?" he asked, his tone cool. "Ms. Robinson and I were in the middle of a conversation." Heather's gaze flickered between Zoe and William, clearly reassessing the situation now that someone with status had spoken in Zoe's defense. "No problem at all," she said quickly, "just making sure everyone is comfortable. I'd be more comfortable without the implication that I don't belong here," Zoe replied, voice low and steady, even as heat burned beneath her skin. Heather's face turned red. "I didn't mean to imply anything. Simply doing my job." Without waiting for a response, she moved down the aisle. William turned back to Zoe, his expression sympathetic. That was completely inappropriate. Has that happened to you before? Zoe gave a dry smile. More times than I care to count. But today, I can't afford to be distracted. I've got a major presentation in a few hours. He looked as if he wanted to say more, but the flight attendants began the safety demonstration, and the conversation paused as the plane taxied and lifted into the sky. An hour into the flight, Zoe quietly excused herself to use the restroom. She was gone no more than 3 minutes. When she returned, she stopped cold. Heather was standing over her seat, her briefcase unzipped, Zoe's laptop partially removed. "What are you doing?" Zoe demanded, loud enough for the nearest passengers to hear. Heads turned, Heather straightened, her expression cloaked in forced professionalism. "Security protocol, ma'am. We received information about a suspicious passenger matching your description." Zoe's pulse thundered in her ears. "What information? From who?" she asked sharply. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that," Heather replied stiffly. "There have been reports of items going missing in first class on recent flights." The implication landed like a slap. Zoe felt dozens of eyes on her, measuring, doubting. William had lowered his newspaper, watching the scene with increasing concern. "You had no right to go through my personal belongings," Zoe said, her voice trembling not with fear, but controlled fury. "Especially not my work materials. I have a critical presentation this morning." Passengers were now openly filming with their phones. A woman whispered, "See? I told you, she didn't look like she belonged here." Suddenly, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "This is Captain Keith Stevens. Is there a situation in the first-class cabin requiring my attention?" Heather grabbed the cabin phone. "Everything's under control, Captain. Just a routine security check." But moments later, the cockpit door opened, and Captain Stevens stepped out. Tall, white, and authoritative, he scanned the cabin, his gaze landing on Zoe standing in the aisle. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, not to Zoe, but to Heather. Passenger became confrontational during a routine security check. Heather replied briskly, "We received a report about a suspicious individual." Zoe drew a breath, holding on to her composure like a lifeline. "I was not suspicious until your flight attendant made me so," she said, voice calm but firm. "She rifled through my briefcase without permission while I was in the restroom under the pretense of a vague accusation. I was profiled." Captain Stevens's face remained impassive. "Ma'am, our crew is authorized to conduct checks when deemed necessary. I'm going to ask you to cooperate and keep your voice down." "She's telling the truth," William interrupted, folding his newspaper and setting it aside. "I witnessed the entire interaction. Your flight attendant singled her out without cause." The captain's eyes narrowed. "Sir, I need you to refrain from interfering in airline security matters. I'm on the board of directors at Pinnacle Industries," William said smoothly, "and I know exactly what inappropriate conduct looks like." "You must have been upgraded," Veronica suggested, her tone making it sound like that was the only possible explanation for their presence in the premium boarding line. "No," Devon replied calmly, keeping his composure even as he felt. Zoe pressed closer to his side. "I purchased these tickets directly." He smiled tightly. "May we board now? My daughter and I would like to get settled." Veronica hesitated a beat longer, then reluctantly scanned their boarding passes. "Proceed to the aircraft," she said, her customer service tone noticeably colder than it had been for the passengers before them as they headed down the jetway. Zoe glanced up at him. "Dad." Why did she ask so many questions? Devon gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "Sometimes people aren't used to seeing everyone enjoying the same nice things," he told her. "But don't worry, we're going to have a great flight." He made his voice sound confident. though inside he felt the familiar knot of tension settle in his stomach, a warning sign he knew too well. But for Zoe's sake, he would meet whatever came next with the same steady poise that had carried him through lecture halls, boardrooms, and moments like this. When they reached the aircraft entrance, Devon noticed Veronica had somehow gotten there ahead of them. She now stood beside another flight attendant. Her eyes narrowed as they approached. "Welcome aboard," the male flight attendant greeted them warmly. "First class is to your left." Devon and Zoe had barely taken a step before Veronica intercepted them again. "May I see your boarding passes once more?" she asked, despite having already checked them moments earlier at the gate. Without hesitation, Devon pulled the passes from his jacket pocket and handed them over. "Here you go." Veronica inspected them with exaggerated care, holding up the line behind them as other passengers began to stack up in the jetway. 3A and 3B, she muttered, as if doubting her own eyes. "Yes, window and middle," Devon confirmed patiently, feeling Zoe's grip on his hand tighten. Nearby, Connor, the other gate agent, was now on board helping with boarding. Devon watched as Connor quickly glanced at a white family's boarding passes before waving them toward. "First class without issue. Is there a reason you need to check our seats again?" Devon asked quietly. Veronica's smile was tight, her eyes cold. "Just doing my job, sir. We have to make sure everyone's in their correct seats." "Of course," Devon replied smoothly, noting that none of the other first-class passengers had been subjected to this level of scrutiny. The businessman who boarded ahead of them was already relaxing in his seat with a drink. "You're in first class?" Veronica asked again, making it sound more like a challenge than a confirmation. "Yes," Devon said, his voice steady. "As it clearly states on the boarding passes you're holding." Zoe tugged at his hand, her voice small. "Dad, did we do something wrong?" He bent down slightly, toward her, offering a soft smile. "No, sweetheart, everything's fine." Even as he spoke the words, the tension in the air was unmistakable at last. Veronica handed their boarding passes back. "Proceed to your seats. We'll be offering pre-departure beverages shortly." As Devon and Zoe made their way into the first-class cabin, he could feel the eyes of several passengers on them, some watching with curiosity, others with discomfort, and many more oblivious, absorbed in their own worlds. They reached row 3, only to find another obstacle waiting. Despite booking adjacent seats, the system had somehow separated them. Seat 3A was open, as expected, but 3B was already occupied by an older white gentleman reading a newspaper. "Excuse me," Devon said politely, leaning in. "I believe there may be a mix-up. My daughter and I were assigned seats together." The man glanced up, his expression mildly puzzled. "Seat 3B, he said, gesturing to his boarding pass. Devon nodded. "I understand. Let me check with the flight attendant." He flagged down Sophia Chen, one of the first-class attendants. "Excuse me," Devon began. "My daughter and I were booked in seats 3A and 3B, but it looks like there's been a mix-up." Sophia took their boarding passes and scanned them, her brow furrowing. "You're right, Mr. Reynolds. Let me look into this." Before she could take another step, Veronica reappeared. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her tone clipped. "My daughter and I were assigned seats together when I booked," Devon explained, keeping his voice even. "But now we've been separated." Veronica scrolled through her tablet with a frown. "The system shows you were assigned these seats at booking." "That's not possible," Devon replied, firm but composed. He remembered clearly selecting 2 adjacent seats online. "I specifically booked us together." Other passengers nearby were starting to watch the exchange, a few sighing in irritation as the boarding line slowed. Zoe clutched Captain Finn a little tighter, her eyes darting between the adults. Devon recalled his father's words from years ago, after a shopkeeper had followed teenage Devon around a store. "They may question your presence, but never let them question your dignity." "Is there a way to resolve this?" Devon asked, calm but resolute. My daughter is 8. She needs to sit with me. Before Veronica could respond, the businessman seated in 3C, who'd quietly observed the situation, spoke up. I'm happy to swap seats, if it helps. He offered a warm gesture that cut through the tension. That won't be necessary, Veronica said quickly, turning back to her screen. After a tense moment of tapping and scrolling, she sighed. It seems there was a system error, she admitted. Mr. Whitfield has agreed to move to 3B, so you and your daughter can have 3A and 3C. Thank you, Devon said, extending his hand toward the businessman, Gerald Whitfield. The man introduced himself with a firm shake. No trouble at all. Finally, they settled into their seats. Devon helped Zoe buckle up and tried to lighten the moment. Look at that. You get the window seat after all. Zoe managed a small smile, though her earlier excitement had dimmed. Dad, why didn't she want us to sit together? Devon chose his words carefully. Sometimes. Computer systems make mistakes, he said gently. What matters is we're together now. Would you have handled it like Devon did? Comment 1, if you would have stood firm and insisted on sitting with your child. Or 2, if you'd have accepted the seats as a sign to avoid conflict. And, if you appreciate Devon's.com dignified approach to protecting his daughter, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about standing tall in tough moments. As Devon and Zoe finally settled in, the pre-flight routine unfolded around them, for all its earlier tension. First class was undeniably a world apart from their usual travel experience. Wide leather seats, actual legroom, and personal entertainment screens already displaying the movie selections for the flight. Look, Dad, Zoe perked up, pointing. They have that new animated movie you promised we'd see. Devon smiled, grateful for the distraction. Looks like we're off to a good start after all. But would the rest of their flight go smoothly? Let's find out. After hanging up, Zoe turned on the television, and there she was. National coverage. Atlantic Airways had issued a statement. Atlantic Airways takes allegations of discrimination seriously. We are investigating the incident and have placed the involved crew members on administrative leave, pending a full review. We strive to create an inclusive environment for all passengers and do not condone any form of discrimination. Corporate PR speak. A performance of accountability that admitted nothing. Worse still, a morning show had somehow booked Heather Winters for a live interview. There she sat, dabbing at imaginary tears. I was just doing my job, Heather insisted. We'd received information about suspicious activity, and I followed protocol. This has nothing to do with race. I'm being cancelled for doing my job. The host didn't ask what information justified targeting Zoe, or why it only applied to the black woman in first class. Her phone buzzed. A text from William Grant. Just saw the news. Don't let them silence you. Call me before you meet with Richard. More messages poured in. Journalists requesting interviews. Old colleagues offering quiet solidarity. Even her college roommate, now a civil rights attorney, asking how she could help. By the time Zoe arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters, a cluster of reporters had gathered outside. Security escorted her through a side entrance to Richard's office, where the company's legal counsel and PR director were already waiting. Zoe, Richard began, his tone stripped of warmth. All corporate caution now. This is an unfortunate situation. Unfortunate doesn't begin to cover it, Zoe replied, her voice steady. Vanessa Chen, the PR director, stepped forward, holding out a document. We've prepared a joint statement with the airline. They're offering a significant settlement, with a non-disclosure agreement. You wouldn't be able to discuss the incident publicly, but they'll admit fault privately and implement new training. Zoe scanned the document. The language was careful, meant to shield the airline's image while creating the illusion of accountability. And if I don't sign? She asked. Jonathan Brooks, the company lawyer, cleared his throat. That would be your right, of course. But Pinnacle has major business interests with Atlantic Airways. Going public could complicate things. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Sign this, or risk losing everything. 15 years of work versus the chance to speak truth to power. I need time, Zoe said. The airline needs an answer by close of business today. Jonathan replied. Back in her hotel room, Zoe paced as her phone exploded with notifications. The settlement was no small offer. 6 figures. Enough to put a down payment on a home or cover Kesha's med school tuition. Just then, a FaceTime call came through. Kesha, tell me you're not taking their hush money, her sister said, her face hard on the screen. It's complicated, Kish. My career's on the line. Your career. What about the next black woman they profile? Or the one after that? Nothing changes if they can just buy their way out of consequences. Zoe sighed, the weight of every indignity resurfacing. The white colleague who touched her hair without asking, the client who mistook her for the assistant despite her executive title, the countless times she'd been told to soften her tone while assertive white colleagues were praised. Each time, she'd swallowed it for the sake of her future, telling herself it was temporary, just until she reached a position where she could make change. I don't know if one person can change an entire system. You already are, Kesha countered. She held up her phone, showing a feed of tweets and posts filled with hashtags flying while black stories. People are speaking up because you didn't back down on that plane. After hanging up, Zoe dug deeper into Atlantic Airways history. What she found sickened her. Multiple reported incidents of racial profiling over the years, each buried with quiet settlements and empty promises of new training. Heather Winters alone had 3 previous complaints, and yet she'd been promoted to first class, where bonuses hinged on positive passenger ratings. A text came from William. Dinner, 6 p.m. Peninsula. Important info. At the restaurant, William was waiting. He rose to greet her, his expression grave. I've been making inquiries, he said. Heather Winters. 4 complaints, not 3. And something else. She's the niece of Brandon Pierce, Atlantic's VP of Operations. Zoe's stomach dropped. That's how she's still employed. She murmured. There's more, William continued, lowering his voice. Pierce is tight with 2 Pinnacle board members. They've already started discussing how to handle this before tomorrow's board meeting. The promotion, Zoe said, realization dawning. They're going to delay it. At minimum, William confirmed. Some think it'd be inappropriate to elevate someone in a public dispute with a major client. Even with a flawless presentation, even with impeccable qualifications, even after 15 years of loyalty, Zoe could lose it all. Not for a mistake, but for refusing to stay quiet. What would you do? She asked him. He hesitated, professionally, taking the settlements cleanest. But as a father with a daughter in corporate America, some fights are worth having, even when they're costly. As she left the restaurant, Zoe's phone rang, an unknown number. Against her better judgment, she answered. Ms. Robinson, Aisha Johnson, National Public Media. Your experience has ignited a nationwide conversation. Would you be willing to share your story directly? Millions want to hear from you. The moment had arrived. By midnight, Zoe would need to decide, accept a quiet payout and protect her career, or take a stand that might cost her everything, and in doing so, change something for everyone who'd follow. The evening air was cool as she walked back to her hotel. The city lights shimmered, each window a story, and somewhere in the distance, a new dawn waited. The choice was hers. The standoff dragged on for several excruciating minutes. Heather clung to her claim that she was merely following protocol, while Zoe fought to preserve her dignity in front of a silent, watching audience. Eventually, Captain Stevens delivered his verdict. Miss Robinson, please return to your seat. Ms. Winters, no further searches will be necessary. Then, turning to the rest of the cabin, he added, everything's fine, folks. We'll be landing in Chicago on schedule. but the damage was already done. For the remainder of the flight, Zoe sat in silence, enduring curious glances and hushed conversations. Humiliation throbbed like a second heartbeat in her chest, making it nearly impossible to focus on her presentation. All the weeks of preparation of sacrifice now felt precariously close to unraveling as the plane began its descent. William leaned over. "What they did was wrong," he said quietly, slipping a business card into her hand. "I recorded part of it. If you need a witness, call me." Zoe nodded, grateful, but her mind churned with doubt. Had this incident already sabotaged the opportunity she had spent 15 years building? She didn't know then that landing in Chicago would be far from the end of the ordeal. The plane touched down at O'Hare International with a jolt that mirrored the uneasy rhythm of Zoe's heart. Passengers stirred, gathering their belongings as Captain Stevens's voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived in Chicago. Local time is 8:42 a.m. with clear skies and a temperature of 74 degrees. We ask that you remain seated until we reach the gate. Also, passenger Zoe Robinson in seat 3A, please remain on board after deplaning. Airport security would like a word." The announcement sent a wave of whispers rippling through the cabin. Zoe's stomach dropped as heads turned toward her, suspicion reignited. Beside her, William frowned. "This is absurd," he muttered. When the seatbelt sign blinked off, passengers began filing out. Some avoided eye contact, others stared. At the front of the plane, Heather stood smugly, bidding passengers farewell with a practiced smile. Through the windows, Zoe saw them two uniformed security officers waiting in the jetway, a man and a woman, both white, speaking with Heather as she gestured animatedly toward the cabin. "I'm staying," William said firmly, remaining in his seat. "You don't have to do that," Zoe whispered. "I do. I'm a witness, and I'm not leaving you to deal with this alone." When the officers boarded, William tried to explain but was brushed aside. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," the male officer said flatly. "Actually, it does," William replied, producing his business card. "I'm William Grant, board member at Pinnacle Industries. Ms. Robinson is scheduled to present to our executive team in less than 2 hours. This delay is unwarranted and discriminatory." The female officer, Pearson, stepped forward, her tone more measured. "We understand your concern, sir, but we have protocols we're obligated to follow. Ms. Robinson, please come with us." "May I bring my belongings?" Zoe asked, gripping the handle of her briefcase tightly. "They'll need to be searched thoroughly," Officer Pearson said. William stood. "This is outrageous. I'll be contacting the airport authority and the airline's legal department immediately." His protest fell on deaf ears. Zoe was escorted off the plane as if she were a suspect. In the terminal, travelers turned to watch, their gazes stripping away every shred of her professional composure. They led her to a small security office and windowless sand for the next 2 hours. Zoe endured a series of invasive questions. 2 hours of justifying her presence, of explaining her career, the purpose of her visit, her right to sit in first class, of having her laptop, briefcase, and portfolio examined and re-examined, of having her identity verified, her character interrogated. At one point, Officer Pearson seemed to soften, perhaps, realizing the situation had spiraled far beyond reason. But her partner remained hostile, repeating the same questions in slightly different ways, clearly hoping Zoe would trip over her own answers. "So you just happened to be seated next to a board member from the company you're presenting to?" he asked for the third time. "As I've explained," Zoe said through clenched teeth, "seat assignments are random. I had no idea Mr. Grant would be on my flight." By the time they finally released her, she had exactly 43 minutes to get to Pinnacle Industries' downtown headquarters. No time to freshen up, no time to fix her hair, no time to breathe. She would focus on the systemic issues that allowed such incidents to occur repeatedly, Without consequencia, text arrived from William Grant. Board meeting has been moved up to noon. Pierce is attending as a client representative. This just got complicated. Zoe's stomach tightened. Brandon Pierce's presence at the board meeting was a clear attempt to influence the director Deshawn. The powerful closing ranks to protect their own. Her phone rang. Agonhar. Mother calling. I saw the news, Elaine said without preamble. Your father and I are worried about the job. Zoe asked about you. Child, we know how hard you've worked for this opportunity. Zoe sank onto the edge of the bed. I keep thinking about what Dad always taught us, that our dignity isn't for sale. He'll be proud to hear you say that. Her mother replied, voice thick with emotion. Whatever happens with this job, you've already succeeded where it matters most. After hanging up, Zoe stared at her reflection in the hotel mirror. The woman looking back at her wasn't just a marketing executive or a potential director. She was the daughter of Elaine and Robert Trabenson, who had taught her that excellence wasn't just about achievement, but about character. She was the older sister of Kesha, who was watching to see if principles mattered more than promotions. She was part of a lineage of black professionals who had endured far worse than she had, creating opportunities through their sacrifices. The magnitude of the moment wasn't lost on her. By declining the settlement and speaking publicly, she was potentially sacrificing her own advancement for a greater cause. A bit. For the first time since the incident, Zoe felt completely at peace with her decision. At 2:30 p.m. Seat to cross. From Aisha Johnson in the NPM studio, Zoe shared her experience, calmly and factually. She didn't rage or accuse. Instead, she outlined the pattern of behavior, the structural issues that enabled it, and the changes needed to prevent similar incidents. This isn't about one flight attendant or one airline, she concluded. It's about acknowledging that racial bias exists in these spaces and taking concrete steps to address it. No one should have to prove they belong in a seat they've paid. As the interview concluded, Zoe checked her phone to find a message from Richard Evans. Board meeting running long, decision delayed, will call. When concluded, hours passed with no word. Evening fell over Chicago as Zoe's interview aired nationally, sparking immediate reaction across social media. Hashtag #stand with Zoe joined hashtag flying while black as thousands. Shereds interview at 7:42 p.m. Zoe's phone finally rang with Richard's number. The board is divided, he said without preamble. Pice made quite a scene, threatening to cancel Atlantic's contract with us if we promote you. Several board members are concerned about the financial implications. Zoe's shirt sank, but she kept her voice steady. I understand. We've adjourned until tomorrow morning for the final vote, Richard continued. 9 o'clock a.m. sharp. I'd like you to be there to hear the decision, to address the board directly. Richard replied, if you're going to fight for this position, they should hear from you. Salath invitation was unexpected, unprecedented. Even Director Kim addressed the board directly regarding their appointments. I'll be there, Zoe promised. As she hung up, another call came through. William Grant. I just left the board meeting, he said, his voice tight with anger. Pierce is calling in every favor, pulling every string. He's determined to make an example of you. Why does he care so much about protecting one flight attendant? Zoe wondered. It goes deeper than that, William replied. If Atlantic Airways acknowledges racial profiling in this case, they're potentially liable for dozens of similar incidents they've swept under the rug. We're talking millions in potential lawsuits. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about Heather Winters or even Brandon Pierce's nepotism. It was about an entire system designed to protect corporate interests at the expense of individuals who suffer discrimination. What are my chances tomorrow? Zoe asked bluntly. William's sigh was answered. No. Pierce has 3 solid votes against you. 4 board members are firmly in your corner, including me. The remaining 5 are wavering, concerned about the financial implications of losing Atlantic's business, so I need to convince 3 of them against significant pressure. William confirmed it won't be easy. After hanging up, Zoe sat down at the hotel desk and began writing. If she had one opportunity to address the board directly, she needed to make every word count. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about challenging the assumption that standing against discrimination was somehow incompatible with business success. As midnight approached, Zoe finally set down her pen, the speech complete. Tomorrow will determine not just her professional future, but whether corporations could continue using financial leverage to silence those who experience discrimination. Whatever happened, she was ready to face it hidden by morning. Zoe's interview had gone viral. Stand with Zoe trended nationally as viewers shared clips of her measured, articulate description of the flight incident and its aftermath. Comments poured in from Black professionals across industries, sharing similar experiences of having to choose between their dignity and their careers. Mainstream news networks picked up this, featuring panels discussing racial profiling in commercial aviation and corporate America's handling of discrimination claims. Social justice organizations issued statements of support, while Atlantic Airways stock dipped 3 points in pre-market trading. Zoe barely slept, rising at dawn to prepare for the board meeting. She selected her most powerful suit, a crimson Chanel with structured shoulders that Patricia had once described as her battle armor. After applying her makeup with meticulous care, she reviewed her speech one final time before heading to Pinnacle headquarters. The lobby buzzed with unusual activity. Employees whispered as she passed, some offering subtle nods of support, others averting their eyes. The receptionist directed her to a waiting area outside the boardroom, where Patricia already sat. It's a circus in there, Patricia reported quietly. Pierce arrived with Atlantic's legal counsel. He's threatening a complete severance of business relationships if they promote you. Is that legal? Zoe asked. Technically no. Practically, companies find ways to punish those who challenge them. Before Zoe could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Atlantic Airways flight attendant claims victim status in accusation. The accompanying article featured Heather Winters on a conservative. Zoe would focus her interview not on isolated behavior, but on the systemic failures that allowed such incidents to recur without consequence. Just then, a text came through from William Grant. Board meeting moved up to noon. Pierce is attending as a client representative. This just got complicated. Zoe's stomach tightened. Brandon Pierce's sudden presence was no accident. It was a power move, a final attempt to sway the vote through intimidation. The powerful closing ranks. Her phone rang again. It was her mother. I saw the news, Elaine said, skipping pleasantries. Your father and I were worried about the job. Zoe asked. About you, child? We know how hard you've worked for this opportunity. Zoe sat on the edge of the bed, voice cracking. I keep thinking about what Dad always taught us, that our dignity isn't for sale. He'll be proud to hear you say that, Elaine replied, emotion thick in her voice. Whatever happens with this job, you've already succeeded where it matters most. When the call ended, Zoe turned to face the mirror. The reflection staring back at her wasn't just a marketing executive or a candidate for director. She was the daughter of Elaine and Robert Robinson, who had taught her that excellence without integrity was empty. She was the sister of Kesha, watching to see if principles still mattered in the face of power. She was the product of generations of Black professionals who endured worse and fought harder to create opportunities she now had. By declining the NDA and speaking out, Zoe had risked her career. But for the first time since the incident, she felt completely at peace. At 2:30 p.m., across from Aisha Johnson in the National Public Media studio, Zoe told her story, calmly, unflinchingly. She didn't attack or accuse. She laid out facts, patterns, structures. Double quotes, this isn't about one flight attendant or one airline, she concluded. It's about recognizing that racial bias does exist in these spaces and deciding whether we're going to keep pretending it doesn't. No one should have to prove they belong in a seat they've paid for. The interview ended. The story went live. Zoe checked her phone. A message from Richard Evans. Board meeting running long. Decision delayed. Will call when concluded. Hours passed. Evening fell across Chicago. Social media erupted. Zoe's words struck a chord. #stand with Zoe trended nationally. It joined #FlyingWhileBlack as thousands shared the clip, flooding platforms with their own stories of bias in airports and boardrooms. Her composure was praised, her clarity lauded. Then, at 7:42 p.m., her phone rang. Richard Evans. "The board is divided," he said without preamble. "Pierce made quite the scene, threatened to pull Atlantic's contract if we promote you." Zoe's heart sank. "Several members are worried about the financial implications," he continued. "We've adjourned until tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. final vote." Zoe braced herself. "I'd like you to be there," Richard added. "To speak to the board directly." The request stunned her. Director candidates never addressed the board. This was unprecedented. A chance and a test. "I'll be there," Zoe said. Almost immediately, another call came through. "William Grant. I just left the boardroom," he said, voice tight. "Pierce is calling in every favor he has. He's pulling strings hard. He wants to make an example of you." "Why is he fighting so hard to protect one flight attendant?" Zoe asked. "It's not just about her," William replied grimly. "If Atlantic admits to racial profiling here, it opens them up to lawsuits. Dozens of past complaints. We're talking millions in liability." The puzzle pieces locked into place. This wasn't about Heather Winters, or even Brandon Pierce's nepotism. This was about a system built to protect itself at any cost. "What are my chances tomorrow?" Zoe asked bluntly. William hesitated. "Pierce has 3 solid votes against you. 4 of you, including me, are with you. The other 5 are... wavering. Nervous about losing Atlantic's business. So I need to convince 3, she said. Against immense pressure, William confirmed. "It won't be easy." Zoe sat at the desk in her hotel room and began. 2, right? She had 1 shot. 1 chance to make her case. This wasn't just about her promotion anymore. It was about shattering the illusion that standing against discrimination was somehow bad for business. By midnight, her remarks were done. Tomorrow would decide not just her career, but whether corporations could still use money to silence truth. By dawn, the interview had gone viral. Stand with Zoe flooded social media. Black professionals across industries shared their own impossible choices between silence and opportunity. Major networks picked up the story. Panels debated racial profiling in aviation. Social justice organizations issued public support, and Atlantic Airways stock dipped 3 points in pre-market trading. Zoe barely slept. She rose early and prepared with care, wearing the crimson Chanel suit Patricia once called her battle armor. Her makeup was exact. Her speech reviewed a final time. She left the hotel and headed to Pinnacle's headquarters. The lobby buzzed. Employees whispered. Some nodded subtly as she passed. Others looked away. Outside the boardroom, Patricia sat waiting. "It's a circus." "In there," she said quietly. "Pierce brought Atlantic's legal team. He's threatening to sever all ties if they vote to promote you." "Can he even do that?" Zoe asked. "Technically, no," Patricia said. "Practically, companies find ways to punish anyone who challenges them." Before Zoe could respond, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Atlantic Airways flight attendant claims victim status in racial profiling incident. The accompanying article featured Heather Winters, seated solemnly under the banner of a conservative media outlet. When it carried financial consequences. As Zoe gathered her materials to leave, William Grant stood. "I'd like my objection to this decision noted in the official minutes," he said firmly. "Ms. Robinson is unquestionably the most qualified candidate. Delaying her promotion because she spoke out about discrimination sets a dangerous precedent." 3 other board members voiced similar dissent. In a typically unified body, the rupture was striking. Outside Pinnacle headquarters, reporters swarmed, cameras raised, microphones extended. Zoe declined to comment. She kept her posture composed, her silence speaking volumes. But inside, the truth settled heavily. She had paid the price for her integrity. 15 years of excellence had earned her the promotion. Speaking truth had cost it back in her hotel room. Zoe dialed Calvin. "They're cowards," he said flatly when she told him the board's decision. "After everything you've done for that company, they're protecting their business interests," Zoe replied, surprised by her own calm. "I knew this might happen when I declined the settlement. So, what now?" Before she could answer, a new email appeared. Subject line: Brandon Pierce, the full story. Zoe opened it cautiously. Inside were internal Atlantic Airways documents, sent anonymously. The revelations were staggering. Brandon Pierce wasn't just defending his niece. He'd been personally orchestrating a pattern of discriminatory practices across the airline. Most damning was a company-wide memo from Pierce himself, directing staff to apply additional security measures to passengers who don't fit the premium traveler profile. A thinly veiled order to target people of color in first class. As Zoe stared at the screen, still absorbing the magnitude of the disclosure, her phone rang. "Lisa Chen, CEO of Atlantic Airways." "Ms. Robinson," she began, her tone formal but tense. "I've just become aware of disturbing information about the incident on your flight and our handling of similar complaints. I would appreciate the opportunity to meet with you privately tomorrow morning, if you're willing." The request was unexpected. Zoe agreed. After the call, she forwarded the documents to William Grant with a brief message. "Thought the board should see this." That evening, social media erupted. #StandWithZoe had gone from a trending topic to a full-blown movement. Civil rights organizations announced formal investigations into Atlantic's practices. Major corporations issued statements expressing concern about their ties to the airline. The tide had turned. But for Zoe, the cost had already been paid. The director position she'd spent 15 years earning had slipped away because she'd refused to stay silent about injustice. Later that night, her phone rang again. "Richard Evans. I just left an emergency board meeting," he said without preamble. "The documents you sent, William, changed everything." Zoe held her breath. "The board has reversed its decision," he continued. "Your promotion will be announced tomorrow morning." She sank onto the edge of the bed, stunned. "What about Atlantic Airways?" she asked. "Pierce has been placed on administrative leave. An internal investigation is underway. The board concluded that continuing our relationship with a company engaging in documented discriminatory practices poses a greater risk to Pinnacle's reputation than losing their business." Zoe closed her eyes. The victory felt bittersweet. Yes, she had finally been granted the position she'd earned, but not because the system had done the right thing on principle. Only when faced with irrefutable evidence and public outcry had justice prevailed. How many others had been silenced for lack of platform, proof, or power? Tomorrow would bring her formal promotion, but it would also bring a greater responsibility, to use her position to create lasting change in a system still built to resist it. The real work was just beginning. The next morning, Zoe arrived at Pinnacle headquarters an hour early. She wore the same crimson suit, now less battle armor than banner. The security guard at the entrance gave her a small, respectful nod. "Good luck today," he whispered. Zoe smiled. For the first time in days, it reached her eyes. "This is deeply concerning and completely contrary to our company policies," Peterson responded. "We take allegations of discriminatory treatment extremely seriously. I'm authorizing our customer service team to meet the aircraft immediately." He paused. "May I ask what would resolve this situation to your satisfaction?" Before Devon could answer, the aircraft door reopened. A woman in a sharp suit entered, followed by 2 customer service representatives. Her badge read Megan Clark, Regional Manager. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, approaching with measured professionalism. I understand there's a situation requiring immediate attention. As Sophia quickly briefed her, Veronica remained near the galley, speaking in hushed tones with the captain, who had emerged from the cockpit. Mr. Reynolds, Megan began, on behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to extend our sincerest apologies for your experience today. There appears to have been, excuse me, Devon interrupted politely but firmly. But calling repeated discriminatory behavior a misunderstanding minimizes the seriousness of what happened. Several nearby passengers nodded in agreement. It was clearly targeted, Gerald added. I and many others witnessed it. Megan's expression shifted as she realized this was more serious and more public than she'd anticipated. You're absolutely right, she replied, adjusting her tone. I apologize for my choice of words. Atlantic Airways does not condone any form of discrimination. There will be a full investigation. Theodore's voice came through speakerphone once more. We expect nothing less than a complete investigation, appropriate disciplinary action, and systemic changes to prevent similar incidents. Megan blinked, startled by the presence of legal counsel on the line. Of course, she said quickly. Our CEO, Charlotte Jensen, has already been notified. She was cut off by Sophia, who stepped forward with a message. Ms. Clark, Ms. Jensen is on the line for Mr. Reynolds. A ripple of surprise passed through the cabin. It was almost unheard of for a CEO to personally intervene in a customer service incident test, especially in real time. Megan's eyes widened, though she quickly recovered. Mr. Reynolds, would you prefer to take the call privately? No need, Devon said calmly. This situation unfolded publicly. Its resolution can be public as well. He accepted the airline phone Sophia handed him. The entire cabin listened, silent. Mr. Reynolds, Charlotte Jensen here, came the voice on the line. I've been briefed, and I want to, personally, apologize for the treatment you and your daughter experienced today. Thank you, Ms. Jensen, Devon replied. This is not who we are as a company, she continued. I understand you're traveling to Seattle to meet with Riverfront Development Corporation. Tom Sherman is a close friend. He speaks very highly of your work. Devon recognized the gesture, a subtle acknowledgement of mutual connections, a recognition that he was someone who should have been treated with respect regardless of the color of his skin. I'd like to make this right, Jensen continued. We have a company jet currently on the ground. I'd like to offer private transport to Seattle for you and your daughter, along with complimentary accommodations for your stay. The offer was generous and problematic. I appreciate the gesture, Ms. Jensen, Devon said thoughtfully, but accepting special treatment now would undermine the principle at stake. This isn't about me receiving preferential service after the fact. It's about ensuring all passengers are treated with equal dignity from the start. A quiet murmur of agreement moved through the cabin. I understand, Jensen responded. What would you propose instead? Devon paused, choosing his words carefully. What he said now could have lasting impact beyond this flight. 3 things, he said finally. First, a formal acknowledgement from Atlantic Airways that what happened today was discriminatory and unacceptable. Second, a comprehensive review and improvement of your diversity training. My firm would be willing to consult on that. And third, a substantial donation to the National Civil Rights Museum, which my colleague Theodore Washington and I are currently supporting. There was a brief silence before Jensen responded. Those are reasonable requests, Mr. Reynolds. Consider them done. Additionally, we'll be issuing travel vouchers to all passengers on this flight as an apology for the delay. Resolution was taking shape, but one matter remained. Devon turned toward the galley, where Veronica stood watching, her expression a mix of defiance and apprehension. And Ms. Winters? He asked quietly. She will be suspended, pending a full investigation, Jensen confirmed. We have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Captain Rivera approached. Mr. Reynolds. Miss Jensen has asked me to personally ensure you and your daughter have a comfortable flight to Seattle. We're ready for departure, if you're comfortable proceeding." Devon turned to Zoe, silently, inviting her thoughts. After a long pause, she gave a small nod. "We're ready," Devon said. As Zoe signed in, it was clear the news of her likely promotion had spread through the company despite the board's official silence. Patricia Washington stood by the elevators, elegant as ever in a charcoal suit worn like armor from decades of corporate battles. "Ready for the circus?" she asked with a knowing smile. "As I'll ever be," Zoe replied, stepping into the elevator. "Has the board made the announcement yet?" "Not officially. Richard wants to do it himself at this morning's meeting," Patricia said, then lowered her voice. "But there's been a development. Lisa Chen arrived 20 minutes ago with Atlantic Airways' entire executive team. They're in the main conference room with the board now." Zoe's stomach tightened. "That can't be good. Or it could be very good," Patricia countered. "Chen's not Pierce. She built her reputation on corporate accountability. On the executive floor, the usual stillness had been replaced with low-level chaos. Assistants moved quickly between offices, faces tense. Conversations halted abruptly whenever Zoe passed. Outside the main conference room, Richard's assistant stepped in front of them. Double quotes, "Ms. Robinson, Mr. Evans asked that you wait in his office until you're called." Richard's corner office offered a sweeping view of the Chicago skyline, but Zoe was too anxious to notice. She paced the room, checking her phone repeatedly. A text from William offered little comfort. Intense discussion happening. "Hold tight, Patricia," sat calmly, her gaze steady on Zoe. "Whatever happens in there, remember you've already won the more important battle. You stood your ground when it would have been easier to take the money and stay silent. If I lose the promotion, after all this, was it worth it?" Zoe asked, giving voice to the doubt that had haunted her through the night. "You tell me," Patricia replied gently. "Is your dignity worth more than a title?" Before Zoe could answer, the door opened. Richard Evans entered, his expression unreadable. "They're ready for you." The conference room fell silent as Zoe stepped inside. On one side of the long table sat Pinnacle's board members. On the other, Atlantic Airways' executive team. It felt like walking into a corporate standoff. Lisa Chen sat at the center of the Atlantic group, a formidable woman in her 60s. Brandon Pierce was notably absent. Eleanor Blackwell spoke first. "Ms. Robinson, thank you for joining us. As you can see, representatives from Atlantic Airways are present. Before we proceed with any announcements regarding the director position, they've requested an opportunity to address recent events." Chen stood calm and commanding. "Ms. Robinson, I want to begin by offering you my personal apology. What you experienced on our flight was unacceptable and inexcusable. It violated not only your dignity, but also the values Atlantic Airways claims to uphold." Her candor caught the room off guard. Following your public statement and the widespread attention it received, Chen continued, "I ordered a full review of our complaint records and internal protocols. What we discovered was disturbing, a pattern of discriminatory treatment systematically buried by members of our own executive team. Several Atlantic executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Effective immediately, Brandon Pierce has been terminated," Chen said, "as has Heather Winters. Our investigation confirmed that Mr. Pierce had implemented unofficial profiling practices and used his authority to shield certain employees, including his niece, from accountability. When complaints arose, murmurs rippled through the room as Chen placed a folder on the table. This is a full report of our findings and the corrective actions we're taking, which include mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff and a complete overhaul of our complaint review process." Then, turning to Zoe, she added, "We're also establishing a passenger advisory board to guide our inclusivity efforts going forward. We would be honored if you would consider serving as its inaugural chair." Zoe blinked, caught off guard. This wasn't a corporate performance, it was a concrete response to systemic failure. That's a generous offer, Zoe said carefully. I'd like to review Atlantic's proposed changes before making any commitments. Chen nodded. Of course. We understand that rebuilding trust takes more than promises. As Chen returned to her seat, Eleanor Blackwell cleared her throat. In light of these developments, the board would like to proceed with our planned announcement. She nodded to Richard. Richard stood, adjusting his Tizzo, recognized it as a nervous habit he reserved for pivotal moments. As you all know, Pinnacle Industries has been searching for a new director of global marketing. After an exhaustive selection process and careful consideration of all qualified candidates, the board has unanimously decided to offer the position to Zoe Robinson. Though expected, the announcement sent a wave of emotion through Zoe. 15 years of dedication, perseverance, and navigating both visible and invisible barriers had led to this moment. And furthermore, Richard continued, in recognition of the recent events and the important conversations they've sparked, the board has also decided to create a new executive position, Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, reporting directly to the CEO. We believe Ms. Robinson's unique insights and demonstrated leadership make her an ideal candidate for this role. In addition to her responsibilities as Director of Global Marketing, a hush fell over the room. This wasn't just a promotion, it was an elevation to Pinnacle's executive leadership team, a position with real authority, a mandate for lasting change. Before Zoe could respond, a hand went up. It was Harold Jenkins, one of the board's more traditionally conservative voices. I feel compelled to voice my concerns, he began. While Ms. Robinson is undeniably qualified for the marketing role, adding diversity leadership seems reactive rather than strategic. Are we making this decision based on qualifications or public relations? The implication hung in the air like smoke. Zoe felt a familiar, unwelcome heat rise in her chest. Even now, even here, her legitimacy was being questioned in a way her white counterparts never had to face. She took a slow breath, then stood. If I may, she said, her voice calm, steady, and unwavering. My marketing strategies have consistently outperformed industry benchmarks by an average of 27%. I've brought in 12 major clients, generating over $80 million in annual revenue. My campaign for the Taylor account earned 3 industry awards last year. She paused, letting the numbers land. Then she met Jenkins's gaze directly. As for diversity initiatives, I've led Pinnacle's mentorship program for 3 years, increasing retention of employees of color by 40%. I've developed inclusive marketing strategies that significantly expanded our multicultural client base. And yes, I've spent my entire career navigating rooms where I was the only one who looked like me. That perspective can't be taught. It's lived. William Grant gave a single, approving nod. I believe Ms. Robinson has more than answered the question of qualifications. Jenkins flushed, but said nothing more. Richard cleared his throat and continued. The board's decision is final. We will formally introduce Ms. Robinson in her new roles at tomorrow's company-wide meeting, followed by a press conference announcing both her appointment and our new partnership with Atlantic Airways on diversity and inclusion initiatives. As the meeting adjourned, board members and Atlantic executives approached Zoe one by one to offer their congratulations. Lisa Chen was among the last. She handed Zoe a business card, her private cell written in pen on the back. When you're ready to discuss the advisory board, she said, call me directly. What happened to you was inexcusable. But your response to it, your refusal to back down, has created an opportunity for real change at Atlantic. We need voices like yours. Zoe nodded, emotion flickering behind her composed expression. William Grant lingered until the room had nearly emptied. Congratulations, Director Robinson, he said, a warm smile breaking through his usual reserve. A well-earned promotion, though I suspect the road ahead won't won't be easy." "It never has been," Zoe replied with a wry smile. "The old guard won't yield power quietly," William warned, glancing toward the door Jenkins had exited through. "They'll be watching for any misstep, looking for any reason to claim you're not up to the task." "Let them watch," Zoe said, straightening. "I've spent 15 years proving myself. I'm not about to stop now." As she exited the conference room, Zoe found Patricia waiting in the hallway. The older woman's eyes shimmered with unshed tears as she pulled her protege into a fierce embrace. "Director Robinson," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion, "and the youngest executive team member in Pinnacle history. Art couldn't have done it without you," Zoe murmured, squeezing Patricia's hands. "You did this yourself," Patricia replied firmly, "by refusing to be silent when silence would have been easier. That's the legacy you're leaving for the young women coming after you." Back in her office, Zoe called Calvin with the news. His whoops of joy filled the room, drawing the first genuine smile to her face since the flight incident had upended everything. "We're celebrating tonight," he declared. "Dinner at that rooftop place you love." "I'd like that," Zoe said, realizing she hadn't properly eaten in days. Next, she dialed her parents and put them on speaker. Her father's deep voice cracked with pride as her mother whispered, "Prayers of thanks. We always knew you were destined for greatness," her father said. "But your mother and I are proudest of how you got there with your dignity and integrity intact." As evening fell, Zoe packed up her office. Just 72 hours ago, she'd been humiliated, profiled, reduced. Now, she stood at the pinnacle of her career, armed with not just a title, but a platform for change. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Some would resist her. Others would claim her promotion was a byproduct of controversy. The road of a pioneer never came without tolls. But as Zoe Robinson stepped out of Pinnacle headquarters that evening, she walked taller than she had in years, not because of the title she'd earned, but because of the line she had drawn. The victory wasn't the promotion. It was discovering that her voice, used with courage and conviction, had the power to move immovable systems. The morning of the announcement dawned bright and clear over Chicago. Zoe woke early, feeling a curious mix of nervousness and serenity. Today was more than a corporate ceremony. It was a public declaration of purpose. She chose her outfit with care, a striking cobalt blue suit Patricia had once called commanding without asking permission. As she applied her makeup, she studied her reflection. There was a subtle difference now in the woman staring back. She carried herself not just with confidence, but with the quiet power of someone who had faced injustice and refused to shrink. When she arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters, the lobby buzzed with energy. Employees clustered in small groups, their conversations pausing as she passed. Some smiled, others watched curiously, wondering how this newly appointed executive elevated in the wake of controversy would shape the company's future. Richard Evans met her outside the main auditorium. "Ready for your moment, Director Robinson?" "Ready," Zoe replied, and meant it. The anxiety that had followed her for much of her career, the pressure to be flawless to justify her presence, had lessened. She had earned this twice over. First, through excellence, then through courage. Inside, hundreds of Pinnacle employees filled the seats. On stage, board members were already seated, with 2 empty chairs waiting in the front row for Richard and for Zoe. Patricia beamed from her seat, pride radiating from her. William Grant offered a quiet nod of encouragement as Richard led Zoe toward the stage. She noticed a familiar figure slip in through a side door, Heather Winters. The flight attendant froze as their eyes met, her expression a flicker of recognition and disbelief. She hadn't expected to see Zoe here. Certainly not like this, not in power, not in victory. Richard took the podium and launched into a detailed recounting of Zoe's achievements, her record-breaking campaigns, her leadership, her integrity. As he spoke, a server moved among the board members, passing out flutes of champagne for the celebratory toast. And so, Richard concluded, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Pinnacle Industries' new Director of Global Marketing and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer Zoe Robinson. Applause erupted as Zoe stood to accept her ceremonial glass. In the flush of emotion, she gripped the delicate champagne flute too tightly. It shattered in her hand. A sharp sting, blood, dripped onto the pristine white tablecloth. Camera flashes went off, capturing the moment. A pause, then a voice. "Congratulations on your promotion," someone murmured. Breaking the silence, Zoe looked down at her bleeding hand, then up at the crowd unshaken. "Yes," she said quietly, raising her chin. "This is only the beginning." Richard's announcement echoed over the gasps in the auditorium. Unaware that Heather Winters, the flight attendant who had humiliated Zoe just days earlier, now stood frozen at the back of the room, her face a mask of disbelief, as applause swelled. A sharp crack broke through the delicate champagne flute, had shattered in Zoe's hand, a crimson thread trickling down her wrist. A staff member rushed forward with a napkin while another summoned the company doctor. Despite the momentary chaos, Zoe remained poised, wrapping the napkin around her palm before stepping confidently to the microphone. "Thank you all for this warm welcome," she began, her voice unwavering. "A little cut won't stop me. I've overcome far greater obstacles to stand before you today." A ripple of laughter broke the tension. Zoe continued, outlining her bold vision for Pinnacle's marketing future, while, just off stage, a doctor bandaged her hand. Throughout her speech, her eyes occasionally found Heather still rooted by the exit, as if unable to process the complete reversal of power. When the formal proceedings concluded, Lisa Chen stepped onto the stage. The Atlantic Airways CEO had come to announce their new corporate partnership with Pinnacle, outcome directly born from the confrontation on that fateful flight. "As part of our commitment to meaningful, lasting change," Chen announced, Atlantic Airways is launching a comprehensive anti-bias training program for all employees. We're calling it the Robinson Initiative, with Director Robinson's permission to ensure we never forget the importance of confronting discrimination directly. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed as Chen and Zoe shook hands. Just beyond the spotlight, Zoe caught a final glimpse of Heather slipping quietly out the exit. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. The woman who had tried to remove her from first class was now removing herself from a space where Zoe held undeniable authority. 6 months later, Zoe stood before a very different audience, 20 young professionals of color, the inaugural cohort of Pinnacle's Executive Mentorship Program. Behind her, the 35th floor view of Chicago's skyline provided a powerful backdrop. The path to this office wasn't easy or straightforward, Zoe told them, speaking with disarming honesty. There were countless moments when staying silent would have been easier than speaking up, when going along seemed safer than standing out. Among the mentees sat Kesha Robinson, now in her second year of medical school, beaming as her older sister embodied the values their parents had instilled in them. But true leadership isn't just about reaching a position of power, Zoe continued. It's about what you do with that power. It's about making space so the ones who come after you don't have to fight the same battles alone. The Robinson Initiative, once a single airline's damage control, had become a national model. Several major corporations had adopted its framework. As chair of the new Passenger Advisory Board, Zoe helped implement policies that measurably reduced profiling incidents across the airline industry. Not everyone had embraced the change. Harold Jenkins and 2 other board members resigned in protest, calling the new focus distracting from business priorities. But under Zoe's leadership, Pinnacle's performance had silenced most critics. 3 major campaign wins, a 14% revenue increase in 6 months, and soaring employee morale. Meanwhile, Heather Winters had found herself in very different circumstances. After her termination from Atlantic, her uncle's influence could no longer shield her. Her name, now tied to a widely publicized incident, had made her toxic in the industry. No premium airline would touch her. Eventually, she landed an entry-level role at a budget carrier in a twist of cosmic justice. Her new supervisor was Raymond Johnson, the same black security guard who had shown Zoe quiet compassion at LaGuardia. Raymond, now promoted to customer service manager, ran a tight, fair operation, and Heather was required to complete the Robinson Initiative training she had indirectly helped create. On a bright Tuesday morning, Zoe boarded another first-class flight to New York, this time as keynote speaker at a national marketing conference. The difference was striking. The check-in attendant greeted her warmly. Security moved quickly. The flight crew welcomed her aboard with sincere professionalism. As she settled into her seat, the lead flight attendant approached her with a respectful smile. "Director Robinson, it's an honor to have you flying with us today. I completed the Robinson Initiative training last month. It completely transformed how I think about customer service." Zoe smiled, accepting the pre-flight champagne with her right hand, its scar, a quiet, permanent reminder of the boardroom moment that had changed everything. "I'm glad to hear that," she replied. The attendant nodded, her expression earnest. "My biggest takeaway: that excellent service means treating everyone with dignity and never making assumptions based on how people look." Zoe raised her glass slightly in acknowledgement. "To progress," she said. The plane lifted into the sky this time, with Zoe Robinson exactly where she belonged. The flight attendant didn't hesitate. "That excellent service means treating everyone with equal dignity, and that speaking up against bias isn't just right. It's necessary for real change." As the plane ascended, Zoe looked out the window at the shrinking Chicago skyline. Her journey had come full circle. Once profiled as suspicious in first class, she now helped shape the very industry that had once humiliated her. The true victory wasn't the corner office, the executive title, or even the program that bore her name. It was knowing that, because she refused to stay silent, despite the personal cost, the path would now be smoother for the next black woman who took her rightful seat in first class. Real change doesn't come from silence or convenience. It comes from those who are willing to speak up at critical moments, even when the risk is high. In that airport, on that flight, Zoe Robinson made a choice and, in doing so, sparked ripples of transformation that would outlast her name. Her story reveals a powerful truth. Speaking out against discrimination can be costly, but staying silent guarantees that injustice continues. Unchecked. Zoe was forced to make an impossible choice between her hard-earned career and her dignity. By choosing to stand firm, she not only reclaimed her own power, but helped reshape an entire system. The corporate world often pushes a dangerous narrative that success demands compromise, that rising through the ranks means tolerating injustice. Zoe's journey proves otherwise. Excellence and integrity are not mutually exclusive. Her qualifications never changed. What changed was the system's recognition that talent should never be silenced by bias. Most of us may never face such a dramatic crossroads, but we all encounter moments where we must choose between easy silence and uncomfortable truth. Those choices matter. They shape the world we leave behind. Thanks for watching, and remember, your voice matters more than you know.